When grief and betrayal collide, it's not the tears that break you, it's the silence that follows. Right in the middle of my son's funeral, with incense still thick in the air and the wreaths not yet wilted, my daughter-in-law, Brianna, looked me straight in the eye and said, coldly, "Tomorrow, you need to get out of this house. This isn't your place anymore." I can still feel how the air froze inside that crowded hall. Guests stood whispering condolences, some crying softly, while I just stared at her, the sound of her voice echoing in my ears like a cruel bell. My throat closed, my heart twisted, but I didn't say a word. I didn't want my only son's farewell to become a battlefield. I bit my lip, held back my tears, and told myself, not here, not now. Nathan deserved peace, even if mine was shattered forever. When the ceremony ended, the lawyer stepped forward to read Nathan's will. Brianna smirked like someone who had already won. "Hope you enjoy being homeless," she whispered near my ear, "because you're not getting anything." She thought she'd broken me, but when the lawyer opened the envelope, I saw the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Something unexpected was inside, and though I didn't yet know what, I felt a strange pulse of hope. My name, Genevieve Hartley, 68 years old, widow, mother, and once a proud homemaker from Dallas, Texas, echoed faintly in that quiet room. My life had been built on love and loyalty, and now it was being torn apart by the person I trusted to care for my son. But little did Brianna know, Nathan had left behind more than she could imagine. After the service, I went home, though I wasn't sure I could still call it that. The house smelled of lilies and candle smoke, the kind that lingers long after everyone leaves. Used tissues, half-empty glasses, and sympathy cards covered the tables. My eyes landed on the photograph of Nathan smiling in his graduation gown, my proudest day. I remembered his words clearly, "Mom, this house will always be your home." Now, standing in that same house, those words felt like an echo from another lifetime. Brianna passed me in the hallway without looking at me. She was already on her phone, whispering to someone, probably her brother Trent. I didn't need to hear the words to know what she was planning. She wanted me gone, and she was going to make sure of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy, filled with the ghosts of memories. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed Nathan had helped me move in years ago, and tried to calm the tremor in my hands. I had sold my old house 10 years back, after my husband died of lung cancer, and used $40,000 from the sale as a down payment to help Nathan and Brianna buy this home. I never asked for anything in writing. I trusted my son's word, his promise that I'd always have a place with him. Now it all felt like a dream slipping away. I pressed my hand over my chest and whispered, "Nathan, please guide me." My fingers brushed the small silver key hanging on a chain around my neck, the one Nathan had given me just 2 weeks before his death. He had said quietly, "Keep this, Mom. Don't tell anyone. You'll understand later." Back then, I didn't think much of it. But now, that key was my only thread of hope. By morning, Brianna's mask of politeness was gone. She stood at my door, arms crossed, her voice sharp. "You have until 10 a.m. to pack your things. I've had enough of your presence here." She didn't shout. Her calm tone made it even crueler. I looked at her face, smooth and cold, and wondered how someone who once called me Mom could say such words. I just nodded. I didn't beg, didn't argue. I went inside, folded my clothes slowly, and packed them into old suitcases. Each fold felt like a goodbye, to my son, to my old life, to the warmth I once believed this family had. My eyes burned with unshed tears. I kept Nathan's picture safe in a cloth and whispered, "I won't let anyone destroy what we built." By 4 a.m., before dawn broke, I quietly loaded the last of my things into my old car. The neighborhood slept, unaware that the woman who once watched their kids, baked for their fundraisers, and smiled at every neighbor was leaving like a thief in the night. I started the car, the engine's hum sounding like a heartbeat. My eyes blurred as I glanced one last time at the house. It wasn't home anymore, just walls soaked in betrayal. I drove without knowing where to go, the highway stretching endlessly under the dim streetlights. Finally, I stopped at a roadside motel on the outskirts of town. The vacancy sign flickered red through the fog. The room smelled of bleach, the walls were cracked, and the sheets were thin, but it was quiet. For the first time in days, I exhaled. I sat by the small window, clutching my purse. I opened Nathan's envelope again. Inside was the business card of attorney Harold Pierce, the same man who'd handled the will, and a handwritten note in Nathan's neat, slanted script. Mom, if you're reading this, please go see Mr. Harold. Trust him. He knows what to do. I've arranged everything. I pressed the note against my chest and wept. My son, my kind, cautious boy, had known something was wrong. He'd seen through Brianna's mask long before I did. My tears weren't just for the pain. They were for the love Nathan still showed even from beyond the grave. He had prepared a lifeline for me, and now it was my turn to follow it. Morning sunlight seeped through the thin curtains. My eyes were swollen, but my heart felt strangely steady. I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and told myself aloud, I'm not broken. I still have fight left in me. I sat at the rickety table, stared at Harold Pierce's number on the card, and took a deep breath. My hand trembled as I reached for the motel phone. Before dialing, I looked at Nathan's note again. Trust him. I whispered, all right, son. I'll trust him. But I didn't make the call yet. I needed to gather my strength. I wasn't going to walk into that lawyer's office as a sobbing, weak woman. I'd walk in as Nathan's mother, the woman he believed in. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My pulse quickened. Hello? I answered softly. Mrs. Hartley, a calm, warm voice said. This is Harold Pierce. Your son asked me to contact you in case of unforeseen events. I'm deeply sorry for your loss. My throat tightened. Thank you, I whispered. He told me to reach out if something happened. He said you'd help. Harold paused. Indeed. He left certain instructions in a sealed envelope in your name. I'd like you to visit my office this Tuesday at 2 p.m. if you can. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I'll be there. As I hung up, I felt the faintest spark of hope flicker in the ashes of grief. Nathan hadn't left me helpless. He had seen the storm coming and built me a bridge through it. That night, I wrote in my old notebook, the one I hadn't opened since my husband's passing. Nathan, I wrote, you always were the careful one. You knew your mother would need strength one day. Thank you for giving me something to hold on to. I promise I'll stand tall. I closed the notebook and slipped it under my pillow like a secret promise. Outside, the wind rattled the motel's thin walls. Somewhere on the highway, a truckage roared past, headlights cutting through the dark. I stared at the ceiling, clutching the silver key, and whispered, whatever you prepared, I'll find it, son. I won't let her win. When dawn arrived, I felt different, not healed, not whole, but ready. I stood before the mirror, brushed my gray hair back, and said to my reflection, you are not a burden. You are not weak. You are a mother. I slipped the silver key into my coat pocket, grabbed my purse, and walked outside. The air smelled of rain, the sky pale blue. I didn't have much left, a few clothes, some savings, and a single name, Harold Pierce. But that was enough. I drove slowly toward downtown Dallas, my mind steady. Somewhere out there, my son's plan waited for me, and I wouldn't rest until I discovered it. But life has a strange way of testing how much pain you can take before it gives you a hint of relief. Just when I started to feel a flicker of purpose, my phone buzzed again, Brianna. I hesitated but answered. Her voice was syrupy sweet, too soft to be real. Genevieve, she said, I have some of Nathan's things for you, keepsakes. You should come by. My heart jumped. Keepsakes. Maybe his old watch or the photos he loved. Against my better judgment, I agreed. All right, I'll come. But something deep in me, the same instinct that warned mothers of storms before they arrive, whispered that this wasn't about memories, it was another trap. When I reached the house, everything felt like a stage play. The vases still held wilting funeral flowers. Candles had burned halfway, leaving wax trails like tears. Brianna stood in the doorway, face calm, but eyes sharp. Come in, she said. The living room was spotless, unnaturally so. On the table sat a stack of papers and a pen, no keepsakes. My stomach tightened. What's this? I asked. Brianna smiled, lips thin. An agreement, she said smoothly. Just something to make sure there are no legal disputes over the house. You sign, I keep the home, you move on peacefully. It's better for both of us. My hands trembled, but not from confusion. I understood exactly what this was, an attempt to erase me entirely. For a moment, I almost broke, almost begged. But then the faint weight of the key in my pocket steadied me. I remembered Nathan's voice. You'll understand later. I smiled weakly and said, all right, give me the pen. My hand shook as I pretended to sign, letting my finger slip just enough to make the signature invalid. Brianna sighed in satisfaction, thinking she'd won. But what she didn't know was that under the table, I had quietly set my tiny voice recorder, the same one I'd once used while tutoring kids. I switched it on. As she folded the paper, she muttered finally, I'm tired of supporting dead weight. She's a parasite. She belongs on the street. My heart twisted, but I didn't react. I gathered my things, smiled faintly, and said, thank you for your honesty, Brianna. I'll see myself out. Outside the wind was cold, but the fire in my chest burned hot. I got into my car, started the engine, and whispered, Nathan, I have it. The proof. The recorder lay warm in my pocket, my first piece of power in this cruel game. I looked back once at the house, her house now, and said under my breath, you took my son, but you won't take my dignity. That night, back in the motel, I sat on the bed with the recorder in my hand. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. She's a parasite. She belongs on the street. I listened 3 times. Each time hurt more, but each time made me stronger. I whispered to myself, Nathan, this is for you. I'll fight smart, not loud. I placed the recorder beside Nathan's letter, turned off the light, and lay down. Outside, the neon sign buzzed, casting a soft red glow across the ceiling. My hands clutched the key tight against my heart. Tomorrow, I would meet Harold Pierce. Tomorrow, I would begin the journey Nathan had left for me. And that's where everything changed. Because sometimes the key to revenge isn't anger, it's patience. Because sometimes the key to revenge isn't anger, it's patience. The next morning, I woke before the sun rose. The motel room was dim, the air thick with the smell of bleach and old carpet. I sat up slowly, my heart beating steady. I wasn't the same woman who had been humiliated at her son's funeral. I was calmer now, sharper. I knew I couldn't afford mistakes. Every breath had to count. I got dressed carefully, a plain navy dress, small earrings, my gray cardigan, and slipped Nathan's silver key into my coat pocket. It felt heavier today, like it carried purpose. As I tied my scarf, I whispered to my reflection in the cracked mirror, let's see what my son left me, and let's see what Brianna never saw coming. Outside, the sky was pale blue, streaked with gold. Cars rolled down the street, people heading to work, lives moving as if nothing had changed. For me, everything had. I drove slowly toward downtown Dallas, passing by familiar roads I used to travel with Nathan years ago. I remembered him as a boy sitting in the passenger seat, telling me stories about the future, the house he wanted to build, the family he dreamed of having. My chest tightened at the thought. He had gotten everything he wanted, but for too short a time. Now his dreams were being rewritten by the woman who had called herself his wife. When I reached the law office, my hand trembled slightly. The building was 3 stories tall, red brick, with white trim and wide glass doors. A sign near the entrance read Pierce and Holbrook, attorneys at law. I parked my old car, straightened my dress, and took a deep breath before stepping out. The air smelled faintly of rain. Inside, the receptionist smiled politely, her voice soft. Good morning, Mrs. Hartley. Mr. Pierce will be with you shortly. I nodded, clutching my purse. The waiting room was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. Every second felt loud. I stared at a framed photo of Scales of Justice, and for the first time, the word justice didn't feel abstract. It felt personal. When the office door opened, a tall man with silver hair and gentle eyes stepped out. Mrs. Hartley, he said. His voice was calm, firm, and respectful. I'm Harold Pierce. Please come in. I followed him into a spacious room lined with bookshelves and sunlight filtering through blinds. He gestured toward a leather chair across from his desk. Please, sit. I sat down slowly, folding my hands on my lap. He studied me kindly. Your son was a good man, Mrs. Hartley. I knew him for years. He spoke of you often. My eyes stung, but I managed a small smile. He was my world, Mr. Pierce. The lawyer nodded and opened a thick brown folder. Nathan left instructions. He added an amendment to his will a few months before his passing. I think he wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of. I held my breath as he pulled out an envelope with my name written in Nathan's handwriting. This, he said, is for you. Inside are documents and a note. But before that, I'll summarize what he arranged. Nathan left his primary assets to his wife, as required under standard law, the house, insurance, and accounts. But he created a separate clause. He opened a safety deposit box under your name, Box K412, at First National Bank. Only you can access it with this. He slid a small sealed envelope toward me. I opened it slowly. Inside lay a matching silver key. My fingers trembled as I held it next to the one Nathan had given me. The two were identical. My heart skipped. This was what he meant. This was why he told me to keep it safe. Mr. Pierce continued. He was deliberate about it. He said it contained documents and instructions for you. I don't know the details. I only know he wanted you to have everything privately, without interference. My voice quivered. Does Brianna know? He shook his head. No. Nathan requested confidentiality. He said, if my mother ever comes to you, give her this. Not before. He anticipated conflict, Mrs. Hartley. I lowered my eyes, tears threatening to fall. My son had seen through everything. I whispered, he knew she'd turn on me. Mr. Pierce's tone softened. He did. And he wanted to make sure you'd never be left vulnerable. He handed me a small paper card. Here's the address of the bank and their contact person, Miss Peterson. Bring both keys and your ID. They'll assist you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands shook around the envelope. I whispered, thank you, Mr. Pierce. You have no idea what this means to me. He smiled faintly. I think I do. Nathan was proud of you, Mrs. Hartley. He said you were the strongest woman he'd ever known. I stood, blinking back tears. He was the reason I had strength. As I left the office, the air outside felt lighter. The world still hurt, but for the first time since his death, I felt like Nathan's voice was guiding me forward. That night, back in my motel room, I placed the new silver key beside the one around my neck. 2 keys, a mother and a son, bound by trust even death couldn't break. I held them together in my palm and whispered, I'll find what you left, Nathan. I'll protect what's yours and mine. I spent the next 2 days in quiet thought. I wrote in my notebook, listing every step carefully. I wasn't going to rush. I wanted to be ready when I opened that box. I also kept my recorder safe, copying the audio onto a spare flash drive. Every detail mattered now. Every piece of truth was a weapon I could use if Brianna tried to corner me again. On the 3rd morning, I drove to the First National Bank. The sky was gray, wind brushing softly through the trees. I parked and stepped out, my coat pulled tight. Inside, the marble floor shone, and the air smelled of polished wood and paper. The banker at the counter greeted me kindly. Good morning, ma'am. How may I assist you? I handed her my card and whispered, I'm here to access box K412. My name is Genevieve Hartley. She looked at the card, then at me, her expression gentle. Of course, Mrs. Hartley. Mr. Pierce informed us. Please, follow me. She led me through a hallway lined with steel doors until we reached one with electronic locks. The room was cold, quiet, and safe. She scanned her card, then stepped aside. When you're ready, use your key. My hands trembled as I slid the silver key into the slot. It turned smoothly with a click. The safe box slid out like a drawer. I lifted it onto the table, my heart pounding. Take your time, the banker said softly and left me alone. For a long moment, I just stared at the metal box. Then I turned the latch and opened it. Inside was a brown envelope labeled in Nathan's handwriting for Mom. My breath caught. I opened it carefully. The first thing inside was a folded letter. My eyes blurred as I began to read. Mom, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I tried to protect everyone, but I couldn't protect myself. You were right about Brianna. I saw it too late. But I've made sure she won't be able to erase you. Everything in this box is yours. It's not just money, it's truth. Use it wisely. You deserve peace. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I could almost hear his voice as I read. Beneath the letter were neatly organized documents, investment records, bank statements, and a small ledger with my name written on it. As I flipped through, my heart raced. Nathan had taken the $40,000 I'd given him years ago and invested it. It had grown to over $200,000. My knees went weak. My son had protected my future while I thought he'd forgotten. But there was more. Underneath the financial documents was a red file labeled Personal Brianna. My stomach tightened. I opened it slowly and froze. Inside were printed text messages, screenshots, and photos. Messages between Brianna and her brother Trent. Words like knives. She just needs to hurry up and die. Then we'll get everything. I'll make sure Nathan thinks she's a burden. He's too soft. Each page was proof, cold, undeniable proof of her cruelty and manipulation. My hands shook as I flipped through emails where Brianna had made fake bank complaints, altered transactions, and even used Nathan's accounts for her personal luxury expenses. Spa trips, jewelry, flights to New York. While she had told me there was no money for house repairs, she was shopping in Manhattan. My tears of grief turned into something else, quiet, controlled rage. My son had known. He'd gathered all this evidence before his death. He'd built me not just a safety net, but an armor. When I finally left the bank, the wind hit my face like ice. I walked to my car, clutching the envelope close to my chest. The banker, Miss Peterson, had looked at me with a kind smile. Nathan often came in, Mrs. Hartley. He always said he wanted to make sure his mother was taken care of. I could barely reply. I whispered thank you before stepping outside. I sat in my car for several minutes, staring at the keys in my lap. I felt Nathan's love wrapped around me like a shield. I whispered to the empty car, "You saw everything, son. You saw who she really was. And you made sure I'd have the strength to fight back." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every insult, every cold glance, every fake tear Brianna had shed. I thought about the way she threw me out of my home like I was nothing. I looked at the documents spread across the motel bed, proof of every lie she'd ever told. I wasn't just an old woman anymore. I was armed with truth. And truth, when used right, was stronger than revenge. I pressed the recorder's play button again, Brianna's voice echoing in the silence. "She's a parasite. She belongs on the street." I smiled faintly. "You're right about one thing," I whispered. "I don't belong on the street. I belong where justice is served." The next morning, as I sat with a cup of bitter motel coffee, my phone rang. The screen flashed her name, Brianna. I let it ring twice before answering. "Genevieve," her voice purred. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should start over. We're still family, right? I don't want tension between us." My lips curled. "Family," I said softly. "Family doesn't throw you out after a funeral." She sighed dramatically. "I didn't mean it like that. I was grieving. You misunderstood." Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. "Let's meet for lunch tomorrow. I'll make roast chicken, your favorite." I could almost see her painted smile. I paused, then said calmly, "All right, Brianna, I'll come." But inside, I whispered, "Not to eat, to end this." That night, I prepared carefully. I recharged the recorder, placed it inside a small black pen, and checked the sound. Clear and sharp. I packed the documents, Nathan's letter, and my courage. The next day, I arrived at her house. It still looked the same, white walls, trimmed hedges, the same porch where Nathan once stood waving goodbye before work. Brianna greeted me at the door, her face glowing with makeup, her voice dripping honey. "Genevieve, I'm so glad you came," she said. "Let's have a nice meal and put everything behind us." I smiled faintly. "Yes, let's." Inside, the table was perfectly set, the smell of roast chicken filling the room. Every plate gleamed like a stage prop. I took my seat, slipped the pen recorder onto the table, and pressed the top discreetly. We talked about meaningless things, the weather, the neighbors, the flowers outside. But I could feel it. She was circling the real topic. Finally, she leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "Genevieve," she said softly, "I know you went to the bank." My pulse quickened, but I kept my face still. "Oh? Who told you that?" She smiled thinly. "Don't play dumb. I have my ways. So tell me, what did you find?" I met her gaze calmly. "Just some of Nathan's old documents. Sentimental things." She tilted her head. "Really? Because I think there's more. Nathan wouldn't keep an entire safety box for just photos. Come on, you can trust me." I sipped my water slowly. "Some things are meant to stay private, Brianna." Her smile flickered. "You're too old to play games," she snapped before softening again. "Listen, I'm being fair. If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut. Half, even. We both win." Her words hung in the air like poison. I looked straight at her and asked quietly, "And if I don't?" Her tone shifted cold. "Then you'll regret it. No one will believe you anyway. You're just a lonely old woman. I'm Nathan's widow. Who do you think people will side with?" I nodded slowly. "I see." I reached into my bag, pretending to fumble for tissues while the recorder blinked silently on the table. "You've said enough, Brianna," I said gently. "Enjoy your lunch." I stood and left the table. Her voice followed, sharp and mocking, but I didn't turn back. Outside, I exhaled deeply, the wind brushing my hair. In my pocket, the pen recorder felt warm, full of her words, her arrogance, her downfall. Driving back to the motel, I couldn't help but smile faintly. She thought she was clever. She thought she could scare me. But she had just confessed to bribery and greed in her own words. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Nathan, it's working. She's falling into her own trap." I parked, went inside, and replayed the recording. Her voice hissed, "If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut. We both win." I smiled through tears. "Thank you, son," I whispered. "Your mother's learning to fight the way you taught me, quietly." That night, I didn't feel fear. For the first time, I felt control. The war Brianna had started was no longer hers to command. I had evidence, patience, and time. The walls that once felt like cages were now my fortress. I folded Nathan's letter, placed it beside the recorder, and looked out the window at the endless dark highway. Somewhere out there, justice was waiting, slow but certain. I just needed to keep playing my part. Because what Brianna didn't know was that the real game had only just begun. Because what Brianna didn't know was that the real game had only just begun. In every story of deceit, there comes a moment when silence becomes the sharpest weapon. I wasn't loud. I wasn't vengeful. I was deliberate. Each move I made was one more stitch in the web Nathan had started for me. I woke early the next morning with the same steady fire burning in my chest. The motel light flickered dimly, and the hum of trucks outside mixed with the echo of Brianna's voice from the recording. "If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut. We both win." I replayed it one last time, then tucked the pen recorder carefully into my purse. That sentence was her signature on her own downfall. She just didn't know it yet. The day was gray, a slow drizzle falling as I drove to Harold Pierce's office. I had decided it was time to tell him everything. Not because I needed sympathy, but because Nathan had trusted him, and I needed a steady ally who could guide me through the legal maze ahead. When I entered, the receptionist recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Hartley," she said with a kind smile, "Mr. Pierce is expecting you." Inside, Harold rose from behind his desk, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Genevieve, please sit down." His calm, warm tone steadied my heart. I handed him the recorder, the documents, and Nathan's note. He read each page slowly, his brow furrowing. When the last paper hit the desk, he leaned back and exhaled deeply. "Your son was very thorough," he said softly. "He knew exactly what he was doing." He looked up at me, eyes serious now. "Genevieve, these are not just sentimental things. This is solid evidence: financial misappropriation, possible fraud, even verbal abuse toward you. With your permission, I can prepare this into a legal defense if she ever tries to challenge your rights. I nodded quietly. Mr. Pierce, I said, I'm not looking to humiliate her publicly. I just want peace and to make sure she never harms me again. He nodded with understanding. That's exactly what we'll ensure. As we finalized details, Harold mentioned something else. By the way, he said, there's going to be another reading of the will. Brianna and her attorney requested a review of the addendum, but rest assured, it will only confirm your rights to what Nathan left. My heart skipped. Another confrontation was inevitable. When? I asked. Thursday at 2 p.m., he replied. I'll handle everything. Just come as you are, calm and confident. For the next 2 days, I prepared in silence. I cleaned my old coat, pressed my dress, and gathered every document neatly into a folder. I didn't tell anyone where I was staying. I stayed off social media, off calls. The motel clerk noticed how quiet I was and gave me a kind smile each morning when I walked by. Big day soon? He asked once. I just smiled faintly. Something like that. Inside, I was calm, but ready. Nathan's plan was unfolding, and Brianna had no idea she was walking straight into the fire her own greed had lit. Thursday came. The air was cold and sharp. I arrived early, sitting in my car outside the law office for a few minutes, watching people pass by with briefcases and coffee cups. When the clock hit 2, I stepped inside. My pulse was steady. Harold greeted me at the door and led me into the meeting room. Brianna was already there, dressed in black again, her hair perfectly curled, her brother Trent seated beside her. They looked like a portrait of confidence until Brianna's eyes met mine. That flicker of contempt was still there, but beneath it, I saw something new: uncertainty. Harold began calmly. Thank you all for coming. This will be brief. Nathan Hartley's will was legally executed, but as requested, we'll review the addendum for clarity. Brianna leaned forward, smirking. I just want to be sure there are no mistakes, she said. Trent crossed his arms beside her, his jaw tight. Harold nodded and began reading. The room was silent except for the sound of paper. He recited the legal clauses: life insurance, property, joint accounts. Brianna nodded smugly, lips curving upward each time she heard her name attached to something valuable. Then Harold paused. He adjusted his glasses. And now the amendment filed 3 months before Nathan's death. Brianna's smirk faltered. Harold's voice remained steady. I, Nathan Hartley, leave the entire contents of Safe Deposit Box K412 at First National Bank, along with all accounts, documents, and assets therein, to my mother, Genevieve Hartley, in full and exclusive ownership. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Brianna's jaw dropped. What? She hissed. That's impossible. Nathan never mentioned any. Harold raised a hand. It's all verified. Signed, witnessed, and filed. Your late husband was meticulous. Trent slammed his palm on the table. We'll challenge this. Harold looked at them both coolly. You can try, but it's ironclad. You'll lose, and it will cost you dearly. Brianna's hands trembled, her nails digging into her palms. Her eyes darted to me, blazing with hatred. You knew about this, she spat. I looked at her calmly. No, I said softly. Nathan never told me, but maybe he knew better than we thought. Harold slid a sealed envelope across the table toward me. This, he said, contains the official key authorization and a confirmation of the funds. It's all yours. I took it slowly, my hand steady. Brianna stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over, she snapped. I'll find a way to make you pay. Harold leaned forward, voice firm. Mrs. Hartley owes you nothing. If you harass her further, I'll personally ensure you face consequences. Brianna's glare could have cut glass, but I stayed silent. She stormed out, Trent trailing behind her like a shadow. When the door closed, Harold gave a small smile. Nathan really thought of everything. You should be proud. I exhaled slowly, nodding. I am. Outside, the cold air felt fresh against my face. The world looked different, not kinder, but clearer. I stood by my car for a moment, clutching the envelope to my chest. I whispered, "You did it, Nathan. You protected me." The next few days passed in a strange calm. I went for quiet walks, bought coffee from the corner shop, and tried to rest. But deep down, I knew Brianna wasn't finished. People like her didn't stop, not until they destroyed themselves. Sure enough, 3 days later, my phone rang again. Her name flashed on the screen. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. I answered. "Genevieve," she began, her voice strained but sugar-sweet. "I think we should talk. I don't want to fight anymore. Maybe we can work something out privately." I let a beat of silence pass. "All right," I said softly. "When and where?" "Lunch tomorrow," she said quickly. "At the house. Just us." But this time, I wasn't walking into her house as a victim. I was walking in as someone who knew exactly what she was and what she was capable of. The next day, the sky was a hard blue sunlight glinting off the white fences as I drove back toward the neighborhood that once felt like home. I parked in front of the familiar house. Brianna opened the door before I could knock. She wore a bright red dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Come in, Mom," she said smoothly. I walked inside, noticing the table already set, wine glasses gleaming. The house looked perfect, too perfect, like a staged photograph. I sat down quietly. Brianna poured wine, talking casually about neighbors and renovations. I listened, saying little. I knew she was building up to something. Finally, she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I know you think I'm the villain," she said softly. "But Nathan's death was hard on me too. I'm just trying to move forward." I nodded slightly, watching her. "That's understandable." She hesitated, then smiled thinly. "I'm glad you're being reasonable. Look, about the bank box, maybe we can share what's inside." "You don't need all that. I have bills, debts, a child to raise. You're comfortable enough, right? Why make this difficult for both of us?" Her tone was calm, her eyes glittering with calculation. I set my glass down and met her gaze evenly. "Brianna, I don't want your pity or your deals. I just want peace." Her smile cracked. "You call this peace? You took everything," she snapped. "I deserve that money more than you ever will." The venom in her voice filled the room. I didn't answer. I let her words hang in the air, each one recording clearly through the hidden mic in my purse. After a tense silence, she sat back, breathing hard. "Think about it," she muttered. "You're not getting younger. You could use the goodwill." I smiled faintly. "I'll think about it," I said and stood. "Thanks for the lunch." Her eyes narrowed. "You'll regret it if you push me." I turned toward the door. "Maybe. Or maybe you'll regret underestimating me." That night, back at the motel, I copied the recording onto my laptop. Her rage, her confession, her threats, all captured. I saved it twice, then emailed a copy to myself. Every safeguard mattered. I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a fortress of truth. Still, my heart ached. I didn't want war. I wanted to mourn my son in peace. But Brianna had declared the war long ago, and now she would face the consequences of her own cruelty. A week later, Harold called. "Genevieve," he said, "you might want to sit down for this." Brianna's lawyer filed a notice of dispute, but it's weak. They're claiming emotional manipulation, saying Nathan was influenced by you before he died. I couldn't help a bitter laugh. Influenced? He was the one who supported me. "I know," Harold said calmly. "It won't hold up. But we can use this opportunity to end things once and for all." "How?" I asked. "We'll arrange a mediation meeting with her and her attorney. We'll present the evidence, discreetly. The recordings, the financial documents. Once she sees what you have, she'll back down." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I spent the days before it preparing every detail. I labeled the files, printed copies, checked the audio clarity. The more I read through Nathan's documents, the more I admired his quiet brilliance. He hadn't been naive. He'd seen Brianna's greed early, and he turned it into a trap. The red folder contained everything: timestamps, receipts, even her private credit card logs. Each line was another crack in her mask. The day of the meeting, I walked into the law office with my chin held high. Brianna sat across the table, her attorney whispering in her ear. She didn't look at me at first, pretending to study her nails. But when Harold placed a small USB drive on the table, she glanced up. "This," Harold began, "is a copy of recorded statements made by you, Mrs. Brianna Hartley, regarding your intentions toward my client. It includes your own words about financial division and your use of life insurance funds for personal expenses. We have transaction dates, receipts, and voice verification." Brianna's face went pale. "You're bluffing," she hissed. Harold simply pressed play. Her voice filled the room. "If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut. We both win." Then another clip. "You're too old to play games. No one will believe you anyway." The color drained from her face completely. Trent shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Turn that off," Brianna snapped, her voice cracking. Harold paused it calmly. "You can withdraw your dispute quietly," he said, "or we proceed to court. But I assure you every word will be public record." Brianna's attorney leaned in, whispering furiously to her. She froze, then finally muttered, "Fine. Withdraw it." She stood up abruptly, snatching her purse. "You'll regret this," she spat at me, voice trembling. I met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Brianna. I already regretted trusting you. I don't intend to make that mistake twice." As the door closed behind her, Harold smiled faintly. "It's over," he said. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. "No," I whispered. "It's only beginning. She'll find another way to come after me. But now, I'm ready." I walked out into the cold afternoon. The clouds had parted, and sunlight streamed through, golden and soft. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a promise. That evening, I stopped by a small diner I used to visit with Nathan. The waitress, a kind young woman named Claire, recognized me. "Mrs. Hartley." "Been a while." I smiled gently. "Yes, it has." She poured me coffee and asked, "How are you holding up?" I paused, looking out the window at the fading sunset. "Better," I said. "Stronger." As I sipped my coffee, I realized I had crossed a line from grief to clarity. Brianna might have stolen my peace for a while, but she would never steal my dignity again. Later that night, I sat by the motel window, watching the headlights sweep across the parking lot. The silver keys lay side by side on the table, glinting faintly in the lamplight. I whispered, "Nathan, it's working. Your plan's still protecting me." The wind rustled outside, and for a fleeting second I could almost hear his voice, calm, reassuring. I closed my eyes, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. But just as peace began to settle, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "You think you've won, old woman? Watch what happens next." My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. Brianna wasn't done. She never would be, not until I made sure she couldn't hurt me or anyone else again. I turned off the light, gripping the phone tight, the screen glowing faintly in the dark. The war she started wasn't over, but this time, I wasn't afraid. Because when a mother has nothing left to lose, she becomes unstoppable. Because when a mother has nothing left to lose, she becomes unstoppable. That night, I sat in the dark motel room, staring at the glow of my phone screen. The message from the unknown number blinked back at me. "You think you've won, old woman? Watch what happens next." My hands tightened around the phone, but I didn't reply. Fear would have answered once. Not now. I turned the phone over, let it fall onto the nightstand, and whispered, "You've already shown me who you are, Brianna. Every new move you make only digs your grave deeper." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly. The motel walls shivered under the wind, and the thin curtains flapped like restless ghosts. I stood by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. The world blurred beyond it. My heart was steady. Nathan's silver keys rested on the table, their metal catching flashes of lightning. I touched them gently and said under my breath, "You gave me the tools, son. I'll finish what you started." Morning came pale and cold. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles that reflected the washed-out sky. I made instant coffee in the motel's old kettle, sipped the bitter taste, and planned my next move. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. Brianna was unpredictable, but she was also careless. She had a habit of leaving trails, phone calls, texts, emails, and now I needed to make sure those trails led straight back to her. I spent the morning organizing everything: the recordings, the photos from the red file, and the financial papers Nathan had collected. I labeled each envelope carefully. Audio evidence 1, financial proof, texts Brianna Trent. Then I placed one copy in my small suitcase and another in a separate envelope, labeled Harold, backup. I sealed it, ready to send to his office by courier. At noon, I drove to the post office. The sky had cleared, the air crisp. When I handed the clerk the Sayas envelope, she looked at me with the kind eyes of a stranger who didn't need to ask questions. "Priority or standard, ma'am?" she asked. "Priority," I said. "It's important." When the package disappeared into her hands, I felt something lift inside me, as if I had just placed a shield between myself and the chaos ahead. That afternoon, Harold called. "Genevieve, I received a notice," he said. "Brianna has filed a temporary order trying to freeze your access to Nathan's assets. It's baseless, but it could delay things." My jaw tightened. "She's desperate," I said quietly. "Desperate people make mistakes." Harold's tone softened. "You're handling this better than most, you know." I smiled faintly. "I've had a long life to learn patience, Mr. Pierce. And a mother's patience," I added, "isn't weakness. It's preparation." 2 days passed quietly. I spent my evenings walking outside, feeling the wind brush my face, grounding myself in something real again. Every small detail, the smell of wet pavement, the sound of passing cars, reminded me that life still existed beyond grief and deceit. But just when I started to breathe easier, the storm returned. On the third night, I was reading by the motel window when I heard a soft knock on the door. My chest tightened. I looked through the peephole and froze. Brianna. She stood there in the hallway, hair damp from rain, wearing a long beige coat. Her eyes darted nervously down the corridor before meeting the door again. I hesitated, then unlocked it halfway. "What are you doing here?" I asked sharply. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk," she said breathlessly. "You're making this worse than it needs to be." Her voice shook, but not from fear, from anger barely disguised as desperation. "You've already humiliated me in front of everyone. You think I can just walk around pretending nothing happened? People are talking. My brother's furious. Do you understand what you've done?" I stayed calm, crossing my arms. "I didn't humiliate you, Brianna. You did that yourself. I just pressed play." Her jaw tightened. "You could have kept it private," she snapped. "You didn't have to ruin my life." I took a step closer. "You ruined it long before I pressed that button. Nathan saw through you. He just didn't live long enough to say it out loud." Her eyes flickered, guilt buried under defiance. "Don't act like you're innocent," she said bitterly. "You manipulated him too. You wanted everything." I almost laughed. "Everything?" "I wanted a room, Brianna. A corner in the house I helped buy. That's what you threw me out of." The silence between us grew thick. Her hands trembled. "Look," she said finally, voice low. "I can't fight this anymore. I know you have recordings and papers. I know you're working with that lawyer. But I can still make this go away quietly. Let's split what's in the box. Half each. You walk away, and I'll stop." I watched her carefully, her painted face cracking under the weight of fear. "You think money is what this is about?" I said softly. "You don't understand anything." She swallowed hard. "Then what do you want?" I stepped closer until we were almost eye to eye. "I want you to remember every cruel word you said when you thought no one was listening. I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything, not because I took it, but because you destroyed it yourself." She stared at me, pale and speechless. Then she turned suddenly, storming toward the door. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice trembling. "You'll regret ever crossing me." When the door slammed behind her, I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. My hands shook, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I'd looked my enemy in the eye and stayed standing. That night, I called Harold and told him everything. She came to the motel, I said. Tried to make another deal. Harold sighed heavily. That's good news, actually. It shows she's scared. We'll use that. The next morning, I met Harold downtown. He brought papers, thick and neatly clipped. These, he explained, are final settlement drafts. If she tries to approach you again, have her sign them. They include a confidentiality clause that legally blocks her from contacting or harassing you further. If she refuses, we'll go to court. I nodded. She'll come again, I said. She always does. And I was right. 2 days later, Brianna called. Her voice was calmer now, rehearsed. Genevieve, can we meet just one more time? I don't want bad blood between us. Let's fix this. I hesitated, then agreed. All right, tomorrow. At your place. This time, though, I had a plan, not to fight, but to end it once and for all. When I arrived, the house looked strangely hollow. Fewer decorations, bare shelves, a quietness that didn't belong to the home Nathan had built. Brianna stood by the window, wearing a black blouse and pearl earrings. Thank you for coming, she said with forced warmth. I sat down without answering. On the coffee table lay 2 wine glasses and a folder. What's this? I asked. A clean start, she said. A contract. You'll have a small share of the money Nathan left. I keep the rest. We both sign, no more drama. I opened the folder and scanned the pages. My pulse quickened. It was a trap, a thinly veiled document transferring everything to her in mutual understanding. I looked up slowly. You've learned nothing, have you? She stiffened. What? I slid the folder back toward her. You can't fix what's rotten at the root, Brianna. Not with signatures, not with fake smiles. Her mask slipped for a second, her eyes flashing with fury. You think you're smarter than me, she hissed. You think you can beat me because you're some poor old widow with pity on your side. I didn't flinch. No, Brianna. I can beat you because I have truth on my side. And that's something your kind never understands. Her face twisted in rage. You'll regret this, she repeated, voice shaking. You'll regret ever walking into this house. I stood slowly. No, Brianna. You'll regret calling it your house when it was built with someone else's heart. I turned toward the door, but her next words froze me. You think you've won? She said. Nathan isn't who you think he was. You don't know everything. I turned back sharply. What are you talking about? She smiled darkly. Ask your precious lawyer. He knows. Nathan wasn't perfect. He left secrets, ones that could ruin your memory of him. I studied her face, searching for truth. You're lying, I said. She shrugged, smirking. Believe what you want, but the dead can't defend themselves. I left without another word, but her voice echoed in my mind all night. Was she bluffing? Could Nathan, my gentle, brilliant son, have hidden something? By morning, I couldn't stand the doubt. I drove to Harold's office unannounced. She said you're hiding something, I told him bluntly. He looked startled. What do you mean? She said Nathan wasn't who I thought he was. That you know something I don't. Harold sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. Genevieve, there's something I wasn't sure you needed to hear. But perhaps now's the time. He opened a locked drawer and took out a small folder. Inside were hospital documents, dated months before Nathan's death. Nathan was diagnosed with a heart condition a year ago. He didn't tell anyone. He feared stress would worsen it. He asked me to keep it private. I felt my knees weaken. He knew. Harold nodded. He did. And he made his plans accordingly. The investments, the box, everything. He did it because he knew his time might be short. Tears welled in my eyes. He carried all that alone, I whispered. Harold's voice softened. He didn't want you to worry. He told me, my mother's carried enough pain in her life. Let me carry this for her. I covered my mouth to stop the sob that broke through. Nathan hadn't been a victim of Brianna's schemes alone. He'd been a man racing against time, trying to secure peace for the woman who raised him. By the time I left the office, the sun had set. painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, tears blurring my vision. Brianna's taunt had cut deep, but all it revealed was her emptiness. She wanted to poison even my memories of Nathan, but all she'd done was make me see how selfless he'd been. That night, I made my final decision. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to whisper my story behind closed doors. I was going to tell it, not out of vengeance, but out of love. Nathan's name deserved to live clean, and Brianna's deceit deserved to be seen for what it was. I called Harold the next morning. "I want a family meeting," I said firmly. "Invite everyone, relatives, friends, neighbors. The people who loved Nathan. I'll handle the rest." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Completely," I said. "It's time to end this." 2 evenings later, the house glowed with soft lights. The living room was filled with familiar faces, cousins, uncles, neighbors who had watched Nathan grow up. Brianna greeted everyone with that same fake warmth, moving from guest to guest, pretending to be the grieving widow. I stood near the fireplace, silent, observing her performance. When everyone settled, she raised her glass. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice trembling. "Nathan was the light of my life. I'm just trying to honor his memory the best I can." I waited for her to finish. Then, when the room quieted, I spoke. "If you'll allow me," I said, my voice calm but strong, "I'd like to share something Nathan left behind, something for all of us to hear." Brianna turned, her smile stiffening. "Of course," she said quickly, her tone brittle. I reached into my purse, took out the pen recorder, and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, cold and sharp. "She's just an extra expense. Once the funeral's done, I'm turning her room into a home gym. Don't worry, Nathan's too soft. He'll never push back." Gasps echoed. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. People looked at her, disbelief spreading across their faces. A neighbor whispered, "That's her voice. I'd know it anywhere." Brianna's eyes went wide. "That's edited," she stammered. "She's framing me." But it was too late. The truth was out, raw and undeniable. Relatives who had pitied her now turned away. A cousin murmured, "Nathan deserved better." Someone else said, "She used that poor man." I turned the recorder off and set it down. "I don't need to say more," I said softly. "Nathan saw the truth, and now so do you." The crowd began to murmur, some comforting me, others glaring at Brianna. She stood frozen, her face pale, her mask shattered. She grabbed her glass, her hand trembling, and whispered, "You ruined me." I looked at her steadily. "No, Brianna, you ruined yourself." When I left that night, the air outside was cool and clear. I walked slowly down a path, my heart lighter than it had been in months. Behind me, the house that once belonged to my son was now just a shell, a stage where truth had finally spoken louder than lies. But deep down, I knew one thing. Brianna wouldn't vanish quietly. People like her never do, and I was ready. Because this time, I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting for my son's name. Because this time, I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting for my son's name. The night after that confrontation, I couldn't sleep. The air felt too still, too heavy, the kind of silence that follows after a storm has wrecked everything in its path. I sat by the motel window, staring at the city lights in the distance, the faint hum of cars passing by. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, tired, yes, but stronger. For months, grief had been my chain. Tonight, it felt like armor. Nathan's love had been my foundation, and now it had turned into my strength. The next morning, the sun rose clean and golden, cutting through the gray that had hung over my days for so long. I brewed coffee, opened my notebook, and wrote, "Justice doesn't always come through anger. Sometimes it comes through truth that refuses to die." I closed the notebook softly, knowing my battle wasn't over, not completely. Brianna had been publicly humiliated, her lies exposed, but people like her don't just disappear. They twist, they scheme, they wait for another chance. I had to be ready. 2 days later, I went to Harold Pierce's office one last time. He looked up from his desk as soon as I entered. "Genevieve, he said kindly. I heard what happened. You made quite an impact. I sat down across from him, smiling faintly. I didn't plan to. I just couldn't let Nathan's memory be built on lies. Harold nodded. You did the right thing. Brianna's reputation is finished. Her lawyer has already withdrawn her claims. She's lost every legal ground she had. I exhaled slowly, the tension easing from my chest. So it's over? I asked quietly. Legally, yes, he said. But emotionally? That will take time. I nodded. He hesitated for a moment, then said softly, You know, Nathan once told me he wished you'd travel again someday. He said you used to love road trips. I smiled faintly, the memory warming me. I did. When he was little, we'd drive through small towns just to watch sunsets. My voice trembled slightly. Maybe I'll start again. Somewhere quiet, somewhere that smells like peace. Harold smiled. I think he'd like that. When I left his office, the air outside felt different, lighter. I walked slowly to my car, the silver keys still resting in my pocket. They were no longer just symbols of pain or loss. They were proof of survival. Proof that even when the world tries to bury you, truth has a way of digging itself back up. But peace, I learned, rarely comes without one last test. That evening, as I returned to the motel, I noticed a black car parked near my door. My stomach tightened. I slowed my steps, scanning the tinted windows. Before I could react, the driver's door opened, and there she was, Brianna. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes swollen, her usual poise gone. She stepped out slowly, hands trembling. Genevieve, she said quietly, please, I just want to talk. I didn't move. There's nothing left to say, I replied evenly. You said enough for a lifetime. She shook her head, her voice breaking. You don't understand. I lost everything. Everyone hates me. Trent turned his back on me. The house, it's being seized. I don't even have anywhere to go. Her voice cracked into a sob. You got what you wanted. I'm destroyed. Are you happy now? For a moment, I didn't answer. Watching her, I felt something unexpected, not pity, not forgiveness, but clarity. No, I said softly. I was never fighting to destroy you, Brianna. I was fighting to stop you from destroying me. She stared at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. You think you're better than me? She snapped suddenly, bitterness rising again. You think just because you're old and pitiful, people will always take your side? I shook my head. No, Brianna. I think because I'm old, I've learned that time eventually exposes everyone, even those who pretend to be good. Her expression twisted, anger and desperation clashing inside her. You ruined my life, she shouted, stepping closer. I stood still. No, Brianna, I said quietly. You did that the day you started believing lies could build a future. For a long, tense moment, neither of us spoke. The rain began to fall again, slow and steady, the way it had the night Nathan died. Finally, she whispered, I hate you. Her words didn't sting. They fell flat, empty, powerless. I took a slow breath. You don't hate me, Brianna. You hate yourself for losing the only person who ever truly loved you. And I'm sorry for you. I really am. Because I'll still remember Nathan with love, and you'll only remember what you did to him. Her face crumbled. For a second, I thought she might strike me, but she just broke down instead, sobbing, sinking to the wet pavement. I turned away. Goodbye, Brianna, I said softly. You'll have to live with the echoes of your own voice now. Then I walked back inside and shut the door. I stood in the quiet for a long time, listening to the sound of rain against the roof. The room felt strangely peaceful. No fear, no anger, just stillness. I realized that revenge hadn't given me closure. Truth had. And now it was time to move forward. The next morning, I packed my suitcase. Clothes, notebook, keys, Nathan's letter. That was all I needed. I left the motel key on the counter and thanked the clerk. Heading somewhere nice? He asked with a smile. I nodded. Somewhere I can remember who I was before all this. The road stretched endlessly ahead of me. As I drove, the city slowly gave way to fields and open skies. The world felt wider again, the air fresher. For the first time in months, I rolled the windows down and let the wind touch my face. I drove until the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange and lavender. I pulled over near a quiet hill, parked, and sat watching the horizon. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle. I took out Nathan's letter from my purse and unfolded it one more time. His words, written in his neat handwriting, still glowed softly under the fading light. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say goodbye. But I want you to know something. You were never a burden. You were my home. Take care of yourself. Live. Don't let anyone make you small again. Tears welled in my eyes, but they didn't hurt. They felt like release. I whispered into the wind, I'm living, Nathan. I'm still here. The breeze shifted gently, brushing my cheek like a touch. For a moment, I could almost feel his presence beside me, watching the sunset too. Weeks passed. I rented a small cottage near a lake in northern Texas, quiet, surrounded by pine trees and birds that sing at dawn. I planted flowers in the front yard, simple daisies and tulips. Every morning, I'd walk to the water with a cup of coffee and talk to Nathan out loud, not about grief anymore, but about life. You'd love it here, I'd say. The sky looks endless. It became a ritual, one that healed me slowly, piece by piece. Brianna's name faded from the newspapers within a month. She sold what little she had left and left town. No one knew where she went, and no one cared to ask. I didn't wish her harm. I only wished she'd learn what love truly meant before it was too late. One afternoon, Harold called. Genevieve, he said, I wanted to let you know Nathan's investments have cleared. Everything's officially under your name. It's a substantial amount, more than enough to live comfortably. I smiled softly. That's not what makes me comfortable, Harold, I said. It's knowing that my son didn't leave this world defeated. He left it prepared. The following week, I visited Nathan's grave for the first time since the funeral. The cemetery was quiet, the air sweet with the scent of rain-soaked grass. I knelt beside his stone, brushed away a few fallen leaves, and whispered, It's done, my boy. She can't hurt us anymore. You can rest now. I laid a single white rose on the grave, the same kind he used to bring me on Mother's Day. As I stood, a memory surfaced, Nathan laughing in the kitchen, flour on his hands, trying to bake cookies for the first time. Don't worry, Mom, he'd said, smiling. I'll get it right next time. I smiled through my tears. You always did, sweetheart. You always did. The wind picked up gently, tugging at my scarf. I took that as my sign to leave. As I walked back to the car, the world felt vast and alive again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, truly living. Days turned into weeks, and the pain of the past began to blur like a distant storm seen from far away. Some nights, I'd sit on my porch watching the stars and think of how life can be both cruel and kind in the same breath. Nathan's love had saved me, and my patience had saved his memory. That was enough. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I opened my laptop and began typing. I titled the document The Keys He Left Behind. It wasn't just a story about betrayal or revenge. It was about endurance, about love that refuses to die even when everything else does. I didn't know if anyone would ever read it, but I wrote anyway. Line by line, I poured out the truth. My truth. And when I typed the final sentence, because sometimes the smallest key unlocks the strongest heart, I felt peace settle over me like a soft blanket. I closed the laptop, walked to the window, and watched the moon rise over the quiet lake. The silver light shimmered on the water, gentle and endless. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the silver key, the one Nathan had given me, and held it up against the moonlight. It glowed softly, as if answering back. Thank you, my son, I whispered. You didn't just leave me keys to a box. You left me keys to myself. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not the polite smile of someone surviving, but the full, genuine smile of someone finally free. The night was quiet except for the distant hum of crickets. I sat down on the porch swing, closed my eyes, and let the wind carry my thoughts away. In that silence, I felt him, not as a ghost, but as warmth, as peace, as the part of love that never dies. Because in the end, revenge had never been my purpose. Healing had, and I had found it. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to Genevieve's story, a story about loss, love, and strength that refuses to fade. Sometimes justice doesn't come from anger, but from the quiet courage to keep standing when everyone else expects you to fall. If you felt her pain, her strength, or her peace, please take 1 second to like this video. It means the world to me. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story that might just touch your heart the same way. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Genevieve's place? And if you love stories about hidden strength, betrayal, and redemption, subscribe to the channel right now. There's another story coming soon, and you won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching.